Well, I thought I'd start by telling you why I did write about Anna Kingsley. I just think Anna Kingsley is one of the most interesting people I have ever come upon. And there's been one small nonfiction book written about her that's available at Kingsley Plantation, which is a national park outside of Jacksonville. And I wanted to write a book that made her really come alive so people would know who she was and what she was like and what she went through. And so I wrote this, Freedom Bound. And the reason I discovered Anna Kingsley, we moved to Jacksonville in 1993. And as was our custom, when we moved to a new place, we moved 17 times in our married life, we would go exploring and see what there was to see to show all our out-of-town company when they came. Well, we found Kingsley Plantation, which is a national park, as I said, on Fort George Island, just outside of Jacksonville. And while I was there, they told about a person named Anna Kingsley who ran that plantation, but had originally been brought over as a slave. And that really caught my attention because I thought, how does a woman who was a slave run a plantation, a huge plantation with many, many slaves? And so I was really, kind of interested to learn more about her. Soon after that, Dr. Daniel Schaefer, who is the one world authority on Anna Kingsley, did an article a series of articles in the newspaper. You all may have remembered that, I don't know. About Anna Kingsley, there were about 3 articles, and it told a little bit more of the facts of her life. Well, when I learned more facts, I became even more interested. And so I determined that someday I would write her story, and I have. Anna was born Anta Majajin Jai, that was her name, in 1793 in a little village called Yang Yang in Senegal, Africa. Her she was a descendant of Najajin Jai, who was a king of Jolof, one of the states of Senegal. So she was of royal blood. At the age of 13, she was captured in one of those tribal raids, and she was marched across Senegal, thrown in the dungeons on Gorée Island, and then put on a slave ship to survive that middle passage, as the trip across the ocean was called. When she got to Havana, Cuba, she was bought by Zephaniah Kingsley. He was a very wealthy planter trader who was in the Jacksonville area, which was Spanish East Florida, and there wasn't Jacksonville at that time. And he took her to one of his several plantations. By the time they arrived there, she was already pregnant with their first child, 13 years old. Well, it wasn't very long before she had a hand in running that plantation. That plantation was called Laurel Grove. It was on the west side of the St. Johns River, about where Doctor's Inlet is now. And pretty soon she had a hand in running that. So she was obviously a very bright and capable woman, very interesting woman. But here she had lost all her security by being captured in this tribal raid. So right away I was, kind of fascinated by this woman who could survive that horrific experience of being captured as a slave and being brought to this foreign country with a language that she didn't know, and pretty soon was running this plantation or had a hand in it. She had 3 children by Zephaniah Kingsley, and of course she was a slave still, and they were born into slavery. Well, finally, after 3 children, Zephaniah Kingsley, who was introducing her as his wife and who had her running his plantation, finally he gave her her freedom, and he gave the 3 children their freedom. Anna wanted a place of her own now that she had her freedom. So he was instrumental in helping her get a small place directly across the St. Johns River from his plantation, Laurel Grove, which she continued to run for him. And he gave her slaves of her own. In Spanish East Florida, you weren't a slave just because you were black. Slavery was closer to being indentured servants than slavery in the United States, which was terrible. Once you were a slave in the United States, you were always a slave, unless you escaped. But in Spanish East Florida, you might be a slave now, but there was hope that you could get out of slavery. There were ways to get out of slavery, whereas, that wasn't true later. But I think, so in her mind, and since she especially had gotten out of slavery, I think slavery didn't have quite the connotation that we have, the same perception of it. And I think she would do anything to protect her family. Because of having been a slave, she knew that that is nothing that she would ever let happen to her family, no matter what. And the only way a woman in that culture could protect her children was economic security. And the only way she could have economic security was to have some land and have slaves run the land. And so in my view of her, it's understandable that she would do that to protect those children and their rights. But there are no diaries, no letters, no journals, nothing that Anna ever wrote. There's no picture of Anna. And so we don't know her thoughts and her feelings, but my goal was to make her real, to make her three-dimensional. And to do that, I had to express her emotions and her thoughts and her feelings. And so I had to have that as fiction. But I believe that everything I had her say, she said. And everything I ever felt, she felt. I became very close to Anna as I did this research.